Hi everyone, welcome back to A Little Literary Love. My name is Shelby, and in this video we're going to be doing my March monthly wrap-up with talking about all the books that I read in the month of March. So let's get into the video. So I ended up reading a ton of books in March. I ended up reading 25 books, which I think is probably the most that I've ever read in a single month. I read a ton. So let me break down all of the books that I read. I ended up reading 5 2-star reads. I didn't have any 2.5-star reads. 5 3-star reads. I had 1 that I did 3.5 stars, 10 that were 4 stars, 1 was 4.5 stars, and then I ended up having 2 that were 5 stars. So overall, it was a really pretty good reading month. I think I ended up reading so much because I did end up doing the Kindle Clear Out readathon, which was a week in March, and it's just trying to read items that are just already on your Kindle and, you know, kind of trying to clear it out and read old things and try not to buy new items, but doesn't always work out that way. But anyway, so now I'm going to get into all the books that I read, and I'm going to do kind of like my past 2 videos where I've done my monthly wrap-ups. I'm going to start with my 2-star reads and then work my way up to the best books that I read in the month. The first one, which is actually like what I read at the very beginning of the month, my first 2-star read was Complicated Hearts Part 2, which I'll go ahead and talk about the first one as well. Even though the first one I gave 4 stars, I really enjoyed it, but the second one, Part 2, I just did not like it. It was honestly a bit of like a soap opera almost with this story. So it starts out, it's these 3 characters, and they end up at the very end of it having like a menage type relationship. So it's about this guy. There's Asher, Landon, and Breslin. So Breslin and Asher dated when they were in high school, but then things happened and they ended up breaking up, but they're still in love with each other, but you know, whatever. And then fast forward, then Breslin, I think it's like they're in college, Breslin is dating Landon, but then she ends up breaking up with him when she goes on this like trip to Europe because of, you know, her past with Asher, how he like broke her heart, so she doesn't really want to find love, whatever. So while they're broken up, then Landon ends up forming kind of a relationship with Asher. So it's a huge like triangle. And I liked the first book because it was so like shocking and drama filled, but then by the second book, that's why I give the second book 2 stars. It was just, the characters were really annoying. Breslin was super annoying. I just didn't like her. There was a school shooting scene in it that I thought was really poorly done. I didn't think needed to be in the book. I think it was just there to add extra drama, which I thought was unnecessary, so I didn't care for that. But overall, this was super angsty. I don't know. I kind of wish things would have concluded in the first part. I just didn't like how things were drug out in the second part. My next 2-star read is going to be Unteachable by Leah Rader. I'm not 100% sure. This is a student-teacher romance. This is about this girl at the very beginning. She goes to like a carnival in her town, and she finds this guy and she ends up sleeping with him in like his car, and then she finds out like the next day she's a senior in high school, but she's like 18. She finds out that he is her like film teacher for her film class in school. So I didn't really like this, even though I love student-teacher romances. It's one of my like favorite tropes in romances, mostly because it's taboo, and I just really like the taboo kind of vibe to that trope. I mean, I don't really like it in real life, but in books I enjoy it. I think I like, this is going on a tangent, but I like really taboo things in books just because, you know, it's a made up world. Like, it doesn't really happen kind of thing. Whereas this felt more realistic, and I thought the girl in this story was super annoying, and she was very like naive, and she felt like how an 18-year-old teenager is supposed to act in this kind of scenario, which is fine, but it's not really what I'm looking for when I'm looking to read this type of book. It felt more realistic, and I didn't like that aspect of it, because then the teacher was also just came off as really creepy to me. I was just like, why are you interested in her? She's like a teenager, and and apparently he had like a past with one of his students before, and he just gave me like major creepy vibes, and I just didn't care for it. So yeah, if I'm looking for like reading like a student-teacher kind of romance, I want one that isn't as realistic as this, because that's more fun. But if you want one that is pretty, like, I feel like more realistic, or what it would end up being like, then you might enjoy this book, but it just was not for me. Next 2-star read was one of the books that I read for my Kindle Clear Out readathon that I did. I didn't do any like videos for it, but I did read this during that week. It's called Summer's Destiny by Ariel Marie. This was a novella. It was like an erotic vampire novella, and this was not very good. First of all, it says it's erotic. It was pretty tame for an erotic novella. Like, there was maybe 1 or 2 sex scenes, and yeah, they were pretty steamy, but I've honestly read way steamier things, and I've read way steamier things that are not in something that says it's supposed to be erotic. Also, the whole vampire thing didn't really play that much into it. I thought the character names were really bad. The character Summer is the one of the vampires, and then Ryan is the name of the vampire king, and I'm just like, that is the lamest vampire king name I've ever heard. But it's like all these vampires are like on the run from vampire hunters, and Summer ends up running into the vampire king, and then they like are, I don't know if they're like fated mates kind of thing, but they end up like getting together and becoming mates, and then they try to like bring their vampire like world, like kingdom, back to what it once was before the vampire hunters came, and they try to take down the vampire hunters. Honestly, this was just way too much for a novella. The author tried to pack way too much content and plot into like a 50-page little thing. And I think this would have been much better had she just stuck to maybe the bit where Summer finds the king and they're like, yeah, let's get together, and then just kind of left it as that. If you're gonna go and do that much plot in something, I think it needs to be in like a full-fledged like novel, not a novella. So I just did not care for this. The next 2-star read, which was another one that I read for the Kindle Clear Out, was The Red by Tiffany Reese, I think is what it's called. I heard so many things about this author. She's one that is actually supposed to be a really good like erotic type author, and I wanted to try this one out to see what you know, how I felt about it, and this one was just not for me. I did not care for this. This is about this girl, and she owns like a like an art dealership, an art studio, whatever, where you sell art, and it's in the red. So that's kind of where the name comes from a little bit for this book. And this mysterious guy shows up and he's like, hey, I'll give you enough money to help your business if you basically like sell yourself to me for a year. And he's like, you're gonna do whatever I ask you to do sexually. And she ends up going with it, and he like sends her these like paintings, and then whatever's kind of like in the paintings, they like act out sexually. So there's lots of different sexual type things, but it got to be way too much for me. There's like some like I felt like it bordered more like bestiality type things, and it was just too much. And then there's like a plot twist that I was just not expecting whatsoever. I don't know. It just was not for me. I'm still interested in reading her stuff. I'm thinking I might try another one of her books, like in maybe one of her series, but I just did not care for this one. My next 2-star read is going to be The Truth About Heartbreak by B. Celeste. This one, I honestly didn't really know what to expect when I was going into this. I thought this was going to be like, I don't know, the synopsis just gave me more vibes of like it being way more taboo than it was. It ends up being a romance between this girl and her like brother's best friend, but I didn't really care for it. It felt more like there wasn't even like a sex scene in this book. There's one at like in the epilogue, I think, which I didn't really care for. That's just my kind of thing with my romance books. I'd rather there be at least one sex scene. I know some people don't really care for that and would rather that not be in their books, but I enjoy that. But then I also did not like this because it featured cheating, and it featured it in which one, I don't really like that in my books. But if you're going to have that in there, you need to do it really well. And I did not like how this one was done because there was absolutely no reason that the guy is in a relationship, like a long-term relationship with somebody, and he cheats on her with the girl. And there's absolutely no reason why he should still be with that person. He totally could have broken up with her way long time ago, or even before he ended up getting together with this chick, but he doesn't, and he stays with her for, it's just like stupid reasons, and like they don't even like each other, and they're not happy together, and I don't understand why they were together in the first place. So that was one thing that annoyed me about this book. But then, like I said, I just didn't like how the cheating part was featured, and then I didn't really like the girl, like her character. And then that whole part of like the cheating, like when they like actually like have sex together, it happens off screen, like off page, and I didn't really like that either. I did not care for this. Okay, and then the last book that I gave 2 stars is going to be That Secret Crush by Megan Quinn. This is the 3rd book in the Getting Lucky series. I'm not going to say too much about these books in this series because I have a whole separate video devoted to this whole book series. But basically I only gave this 2 stars mostly because I didn't like the main character, Reed. Reed is the hero that this book is about. He's the 3rd son, the 3rd brother of this series, and it's him trying to find like romance, and I just overall did not like his character. And I also didn't like where Megan Quinn featured like one of her, I guess it's a trope, sort of. I don't like when authors feature tropes where there's like miscommunication, or their characters don't communicate at all, or they're like omitting things and not telling their partner things. And that featured this kind of thing pretty heavily, and I just did not care for it. The other books I really liked, but Anyway, so I'll leave a link to that other video if you want to hear more of my thoughts on the Getting Lucky series. Okie dokie, now on to my 3-star reads. So these were books that I enjoyed them, but they're not really books that I ever plan on picking up again. They're honestly not even books that are very memorable. I enjoyed them when I read them, but you know, honestly, like a month from now, I'm probably gonna forget everything that happened in them. So the first one is gonna be Not My Romeo by Ilsa Madden Mills. I listened to this on an audiobook. This one is about, it starts off, the heroine is going on a blind date, and she mistakes this guy who's like a famous football player, but she doesn't have a TV and she doesn't ever watch sports, so she doesn't realize that he's a famous football player. She mistakes him for her blind date, so they end up striking up a conversation, and I think they end up having like a one-night stand. And then after that, he like wants her to sign like a NDA because, you know, I can't remember if he tells her who he is or not, but she signs it with like a fake name, and then he just keeps like popping up in her life. Like I think she's a librarian, and there's like a play, like a school play going on in their town that he like volunteers to like help out with, which she also volunteered to help out with, so he just like keeps popping up. So it's like their romance. As you can tell, I don't really remember a ton about this. I remember I liked it when I was reading it, but that, you know, kind of tells you anything. It was fine. Next 3-star read that I had, which is another book that I read during the Kindle Clear Out readathon, is going to be Buck Wild by Lauren Landish. I don't think I've ever read a Lauren Landish book, but this is about, it's like a Western cowboy type romance. It's about this girl, and she's wanting to become a vet. She is, I guess, kind of like shadowing or like interning this vet that does like big farm animals, and the hero from the story, his family owns like a ranch or farm or something, and he actually likes to, like, he's a bull rider, but it's like his downtime for the bull riding season or something, so he's like helping out his family. Yeah, that's like mostly all I remember about the plot of this. I remember enjoying it again. I did like the hero and the heroine's like banter together, and they did have some really steamy sex scenes in this book, but you know, otherwise it was okay. This is like the first in the series, and I honestly probably am not going to pick up the other books. It wasn't like super memorable enough for me to want to continue the series. Then another 3-star read that again I read for the Kindle Clear Out readathon is going to be Irish Kisses by Mickey Miller, and I read this specifically because the Kindle Clear Out readathon took place during the week of St. Patrick's Day, so I wanted to read like something that had a St. Patrick's Day kind of feel, and this Irish Kisses, I was like, oh, this is perfect for St. Patrick's Day. So this is about like an MMA fighter, and he ends up challenging his like longtime rival to like the match to end all matches kind of thing. And it's about his romance with this girl who's, I'm not exactly sure what she's supposed to be. I could never figure that out, if she was like his like new PR person or something to kind of help with his like image, because I don't know. But it's their romance. This was fine. Again, like the sex scenes were fairly steamy, but the overall plot was just kind of meh, and it lacked like the depth that I was wanting with the characters. And then there was this like secondary like throwing through our loop that like, you know, they get together and then they like try to like ruin their relationship by having like this secret, oh, he's got a secret kid and he's actually married to somebody kind of thing, which was like, just felt like it came out of nowhere. I didn't really care for that. I didn't really know why it was in the book, and I didn't think it needed to be in there. Yeah, so this was okay. My next 3-star read is going to be The Sea Witch by Katie Robert, which I actually have a physical copy of. I read the ebook of this for the Kindle Clear Out Readathon because they have that on ebook too. But then I just also have the physical copy. This I gave 3 stars. This is in her Katie Roberts' Wicked Villain series, which I've really liked, like all of the books in the series so far. But this one I just kind of was like, meh. It was fine. This is about Ursa, and this is a menage romance. So it's about Ursa, Alaric, and Zuri. And it features like BDSM elements. Ursa is the dom in this one. I just didn't care for this, mostly because I felt like it needed more development in regards to the relationships for everybody. It was apparently like Alaric and Ursa had a relationship already built, which I didn't care for because I just didn't feel like Alaric was like saying that he was in love with Ursa, and I just didn't feel that. It didn't really come across all that well. And then I also felt like, you know, Zuri was just kind of there. She thought she was in love with Alaric, but then she's like, oh, well, maybe I'm also in love with Ursa, which again, I didn't feel. And I also felt like Zuri was more of like a third wheel, that she didn't need to be there for Alaric and Ursa's relationship. It needed a little bit more development in that department. So, which is sad because I really like Katie Robert. I also almost feel like this was just more kind of an afterthought, and I'm almost hesitant to read the last book in this series because I've heard it's also not that great, because I'm pretty sure when Katie Robert planned this out at the beginning, when like you could see where she had these books for pre-order, it only went to The Beast, which is the book before this one, and then as she was putting them out, then she decided to also pop out this one and Queen Takes a Rose, which is the book that's after this. And I feel like it kind of shows because the other books feel like they're more involved and like woven together, and then these just are kind of like an afterthought. I don't know. So, didn't really care for it. Last book that I gave 3 stars to is going to be That Forever Girl, which is the second book in the Getting Lucky series by Megan Quinn. This one was okay. I think it was just not really like my favorite. It features the second chance romance, and that's one of like my least favorite romance tropes. There's nothing bad about this book. I don't really have anything bad to say about it. It was just kind of okay. Again, my thoughts and more about this book are going to be in that other video. My only 3.5 star read is going to be Bad Prince by Lillian Monroe. This is like a royalty kind of romance, and this is also a Cinderella spinoff. This is about this girl. She's on like the rowing team at her college, and her best friend happens to have like a invitation to the royals like ball, and she gives it to the heroine, and she ends up like sneaking in to the prince's ball, and the prince like finds her and thinks that she's like the most attractive woman he's ever seen, and they have like a one-night stand kind of thing, and then he finds her later on, and they keep like kind of sneaking around and getting together. And then this also is like a sort of secret baby, not really. She ends up getting pregnant from their you know, being together, but then they like can't be together because he's a prince and she's a commoner and blah blah blah. This was good. It was still like okay. That's why I gave it 3.5 stars, because I couldn't really decide if it was like okay or more like I really liked it. I don't know. This was good. I don't really have much more to say about it. Okay, then on to my 4-star reads, which I've already talked about. Complicated Hearts Part 1, which I really enjoyed. Then I have A Favor for a Favor by Helena Hunting, which I might put this over here. Yeah. So I had read the first book in this series in February, so I just continued on with this series. I really enjoyed this one. This is about the sister of the hockey player in the first book, and she comes to town, and the first book's hero ends up giving her like his apartment, because when she gets into town, she breaks up with her boyfriend, who she was supposed to be living in his apartment, or they were supposed to be getting an apartment together, and she ends up being across the hall from another hockey player on this team. And he gets into like an accident on the rink, and she is I think she's a physical therapist, so she ends up helping him out to help him like recover from his accident. This was really good. I really enjoyed this. I really enjoyed this whole series. Yeah, so. Then I read The Lovely War by Julie Berry. This is another 4-star read. This is one of my books that on my like TBR for the year of books that I'm wanting to read. This is a like YA historical book, and this was pretty unique because its story, like the narrator of this story is Aphrodite. It starts out where Aphrodite and Ares are going to like a hotel, and it's like the present tense of this book takes place during World War II. And they're going to this hotel to like have like an affair, and her husband Hephaestus catches them in his like golden web. So she's on trial for, you know, cheating on him basically. And so she decides to plead her case by talking about these love stories. And basically like saying like how she always like puts people together and sees love, but she never actually finds love for herself. So her story that she tells Hephaestus is about these 4 people during World War I, and how she kind of got these people together and they like fell in love, and kind of like their journey together, which it does take place during a great war, so you know that there's some things that are gonna happen that's kind of sad. There's little bits where they like can't be together because one of the heroes is like a soldier, and he's, you know, going and being deployed. But this, I really enjoyed this. I thought it was pretty unique. It did definitely read YA, which I have seen that I'm definitely more now an adult reader. I prefer more adult books than I do YA nowadays. So that aspect I didn't really care for, but I did still really enjoy this one. Okay, so we have another Katie Robert book. So this one that I read is Air. I read this at the beginning of the book. This is the second book in her like vampire series. I don't remember what it's called. And this has this girl who she's like half vampire, but also half, I think she's half like angel. So she's got, which they unlocked her like powers, like extra powers that she has in the first book of this series. And so now in this book they're like being hunted sort of, and it's about her and then these 3 vampire guys, and they're all sort of in a relationship together. She ends up having like sex with like all of them, and then I know 2 of them like to have sex with each other, 2 of the guys. and I can't remember if the third guy ever joins in. So there's lots of like sword crossing. If you're into that, you'll probably like this. There's definitely like the, what is it, like blood play, I think is like the sexual activity, but like I'm okay with it when it's in a context like this where it's like vampires. Like it makes sense. This is just a fun read. And it's really short. There's not a ton of plot to this and a ton of depth to this, but it's just a fun read, and I enjoy it, and I can't wait for the next one of this series to come out, and I will definitely read it when it does. Four-star read, which I also read during the Kindle Clear Out Readathon because I had the audiobook for this as well, is going to be The Kiss Quotient by Helen Huang. Yeah, I'm super late to the game on reading this book, but I'm really glad I did. This was really enjoyable. For those of you that don't know what this book is about, this is about this girl, and I think she has Asperger's syndrome. She has some form of autism, and her parents, her mother mostly, are like wanting her to get married so that they can have like grandchildren, but she doesn't really like being intimate with other people. She doesn't like touching other people. She has had like sexual relationships with people, but she just didn't enjoy it. So she hires a male escort to teach her how to be intimate and how to like have a relationship with somebody. And so in doing that, they end up having a relationship together, and it's really cute. I really enjoyed this, and it was much steamier than I was expecting it to be. I don't know why, because I mean, like, he's a male escort, but for some reason I expected there to be some steam, but I didn't expect there to be a ton. This had more steam than I was anticipating, but this was super good. And if you haven't picked this up yet, if you're like me that has been waiting to read this, you should definitely read it because it was really good. Next for read is going to be That Second Chance by Megan Quinn. This is the first book in the Getting Lucky series, and this is the book that kind of like sets up the whole premise for the series. This series is about these brothers that are trying to find love. They're unlucky in love after they went on a trip to New Orleans for their youngest brother when he turns 21. They end up breaking the table of like a fortune teller, and she like curses them to be unlucky and to only have like broken love. So this is the first brother. Again, my video going more into the detail of like my thoughts and the series is going to be down in below. So if you want to check that out, go ahead and do that. My next 4-star read is going to be Roommate by Serena Bowen. I can't remember if I read this during Kindle Clear Out or not. I don't think I did. This is a male romance. This is about the Roderick. He's moving back to his hometown after like a bad breakup, and he's basically like homeless because his parents don't accept him for being gay. And he gets a job at like a coffee shop, and he ends up being then the roommate of there's another guy that works at this coffee shop. They end up being like roommates together, and then they end up having like a romance together. But the guy doesn't like realize that I don't know if he's actually gay. I think he might be more bisexual, but he doesn't realize that he's only ever been attracted to girls before, except for this guy. So it's their relationship. This is cute. This has a lot of food featured in it. He's he's like a baker, so he makes a lot of food and then teaches the other guy how to cook, and it was really cute. Then I read Mine Till Midnight by Lisa Kleypas. This is the first book in the Hathaway series. This was really good, and I'm really glad I liked this book. I have a lot of Lisa Kleypas books, so I'm glad I like her writing style. So now I can actually read all of the books that I have. This is about this girl. Honestly, she acts like the head of her family because her older brother is like drunk most of the time, so she has to run the family, and they're moving into this like new place. But she ends up meeting this guy who is a gypsy, like Romani kind of person. And because her older brother is at one of his like establishments, like it's kind of complicated because he doesn't act like a gypsy. He like left the whole like gypsy whatever. I don't really understand that aspect, and I'm not the best at explaining it. But he owned some like businesses. But anyway, he like helps her out because, you know, her brother's at this place and she's trying to help him because he's like drunk or whatever. And they're moving into this new house, but it's really like decrepit. And the gypsy guy ends up being like pretty good friends with like their neighbors, so they keep like running into each other. I really enjoyed this book, even though I'm not obviously the best at explaining it. This had a really cute romance. I really liked the two of them together. But I also realized that this series takes place after one of Lisa Kleypas's other series, and it features some of the characters from that series. So I really, like, now I need to go back and read that series so I can find out, like, how those people, like, started out, like, how they had a romance together, and then get back to the series and find out what happens to the rest of the siblings in this family. So then I read Romancing the Duke by Tessa Dare, and I wanted to read this because this is like the first in the Castles Ever After series. I was just kind of in a like historical romance mood. This is about this girl, I think her name's Izzy, and she inherits this castle. But there's already somebody living in this castle, and he doesn't know that his castle was sold. He unknowingly, like, it wasn't his intention to sell it, but his, like, people that manage his money, are trying to kind of, like, swindle him out of his money, and they, like, sell his castle to this chick. This was so much fun. I really enjoy Tessa Dare's writing. She, so far, has been like my favorite historical romance author, just because her books are just so easy to get into. And there's so many like quirks to it too. So Izzy, her dad, wrote these like children's kind of stories about him telling her stories as when she was a little girl, so she's pretty famous for that. And then there's these people that are that love those stories, and they like dress up in like knights and armor and like act out things from the stories, and it's really cute. But then the hero is like really curmudgeon-y, and he is actually like mostly blind. He still has like some eyesight sometimes from being in like a duel, I think is how he lost his eyesight. So he's just kind of like, and she's just like all light and bubbly, and their romance is so cute, and I really enjoyed this one. And the last book that I read for the month of March that ended up being another 4-star read is going to be A Curse So Dark and Lonely by Bridget Kimmerer. I don't know. Again, this is another book that everybody has read and I have not read, and I was just kind of, you know, didn't really pick it up, but now I have. I really enjoyed this one. This is good. This is a YA fantasy, and this is also like a Beauty and the Beast retelling. This is about this girl, and she gets like captured, taken to this other land to try to break the curse that's on this land's prince. This was really cool. This features the girl actually has cerebral palsy, and I like how it was featured in this book because it's like there, but it doesn't really, she doesn't let that like hinder her. She's just like, yeah, I have this thing, so what? And she's like really determined and stubborn. She wants to like help the people of this land. I really liked this character's like her tenacity. And yeah, there is like sort of a romance, but that wasn't like a huge feature in this. It was mostly about like helping him to save like his people, and then they also like are kind of trying to figure out how to break his curse. And then there's more books in this series that I will most likely pick up. I just don't know when I'm going to pick those books up. Okay, now moving on to my 4.5 star read, my only 4.5 star read right before we get to my top 2, my favorite books from the month. My 4.5 star read is going to be That Swoony Feeling, which is the 4th book in the Getting Lucky series by Megan Quinn. This is about the 4th brother, and he is he's basically a cinnamon roll, but he's also an idiot, and his romance with this girl that's like had a crush on him for like forever, and he's the only one in town that doesn't realize that she likes him. This was really cute. I really like this one. So now on to my 2 5-star reads, the ones that I loved so much. My first one is going to be A Secret for a Secret by Helena Hunting. This is the 3rd book in this series. This is about one of the football players. His name's King. And he ends up having, in the other books, he was in like a long-term, he was in a like long-term, long-distance relationship with somebody, but before this book takes place, he ends up breaking up with her. And then how this book starts out, he ends up having a one-night stand with this girl. And then later on, he finds out that this girl is actually his GM's daughter. And he's like, oh crap, I had like a sexual relationship with the GM's daughter, and her name is Queenie. And I think they just have the most adorable names together, King and Queenie. And this guy is definitely a cinnamon roll hero. He calls Queenie my queen, and he is like so doting. Like, he's so sweet. I loved this book so much. Oh, yeah, he's like so supportive of Queenie. She has some things that have happened in her past that makes her have a lot of like self-doubt and low self-worth, and he's like, no, you know, you got this. And it just, I love this book so much. And then I just found out that the author is writing a 4th book coming out this year about about some people that happen in this book. It's going to be about King's mom and her relationship with Queenie's dad. I'm really excited about it. And then the last 5-star read that I read, which also took place during the Kindle Clear Out Readathon, is going to be Hero by Lauren Rowe. This is the 1st book in one of her series. I don't remember what the series name is called, but this is about, what's his name? Colby. This is about Colby. Colby is a firefighter, and he ends up getting hurt on the job when he is trying to save, actually he's trying to save a baby. So there are a lot of like hard, heavy-hitting things in this book. But anyway, he gets hurt in this fire and then he's in the hospital, and so his physical therapist, the person that's in charge of like helping him to rehabilitate, her name is Lydia, and it's their romance between Colby and Lydia. Lydia is a little bit hesitant to get with Colby and kind of form a relationship with him because she, a few years before that, had lost her husband. Her husband had been a police officer and he ended up being killed on the job, and she was left with raising their children on her own. So right off the bat, it has a lot of heavy things that happen in this book, but there's also, for the most part, it's lighthearted. The Morgan, I think that might be what the series name is called, is like the Morgan brothers, maybe. Their family is really great. A lot of his brothers are really funny and their banter is really great. But I loved Colby because he was unapologetic about liking Lydia and wanting to be with her and thinking she's amazing. And then she like tells him like, hey, you know, this isn't just me, I have children. So then he, you know, wants to do anything he can to like be like, hey, I'm here for you, but then I'm also here for your children, and trying to like warm them over to him. And it's so cute. And this was like so heartwarming, but it's also, I cried a lot during this book too. This was just so good. And I probably need to read more books in this series. Even though I like the characters, but I don't know if I care enough to like read their stories. I probably should though, because I really, really liked this one. Okay, so those are all of the 25 books that I read in March, which was so many books. But I really hope that you enjoyed this and kind of finding out my thoughts on all of the books that I read, and hopefully you're inspired to pick some of these books up. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe so you can find out, you know, watch more of my videos that I post. And I look forward to seeing you all in the next one. Thanks. Bye guys.